Hey everyone, Sam here from Spun, and today we are making the actual best meatloaf recipe. Today we are taking the humble American meatloaf recipe and we are making it the absolute best version of itself possible. I know it's not super pretty, I know it's not super flashy, but this version is so moist, it is so flavorful. We are not using store-bought ketchup. Everything is going to be made from scratch and I really think you're going to love it. First thing you want to do is get your oven preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're going to start with a panade. This is just a fancy way to say we're going to get our breadcrumbs nice and moist before we begin. Also, we're not actually using breadcrumbs, we're using panko. Tested this recipe with both. Panko just gives the best results. We need a cup of plain panko. Just going to put this in a large mixing bowl. I do want to mention that if you don't have panko, you can just take some sandwich bread, like 3 slices of white bread, and tear that up into little pieces, and that works equally as well. And that's like 85-90 grams of panko. Next, we are going to need our milk. So I'm using whole milk, and this is a half cup of whole milk. If you don't do dairy, you could use beef broth instead. I'd probably use a little bit less, but milk is really great for giving us a very tender crumb. Crumb is what I call the inside of a cake. I don't know if you would call it that in a meatloaf, but it gives you a really tender texture. Okay, so we're just going to drizzle the milk over the panko, and I'm just going to stir it. I want this to get nicely moistened. So I want all of the crumbs coated with the milk, mixed with the milk. So not everyone does this with a meatloaf. They'll just often throw the breadcrumbs right in with the meat. This is going to give you a much better texture. Okay, we want this to sit for 10 minutes once everything's mixed up. Let me be thorough. So I'm just going to set this aside and we'll hop over to the stovetop. Grab yourself a medium-sized skillet and we're going to add a tablespoon of your favorite cooking oil to it. Avocado oil or olive oil works really well here. Turn it to medium heat and we're going to heat the oil until it's shimmering. And then we are going to add our onion. So we are using a yellow onion here. You need a cup or just chop up 1 medium-sized onion, that'll be fine. I really recommend chopping it nice and small. Let me show you how it looks here. This fine chop is it's just gonna give you a better texture overall, and the onion will really kind of melt into the meatloaf in a really nice way. Add this to the pan, and we're just going to stir this onion until it's nicely softened. This usually takes like 3 to 5 minutes. All right, once your onions are softened and beginning to look a little translucent, we're going to add our garlic. Tablespoon of minced garlic. Add this right here. We don't waste garlic any more than we waste butter around here. Love garlic. And we're just going to cook this until it's nice and fragrant. Keep it moving so it doesn't burn. And usually for garlic, that's 30 seconds. You don't have to count it, just smell it. Sometimes people will put like the raw onion, the raw garlic, well, they don't usually use tomato paste, they use ketchup, right in with the meatloaf. We are going to add a lot of flavor and improve the texture by just taking these couple extra seconds to cook everything. And our breadcrumbs or panko needs to sit anyway, so it's really worth the extra dish to do this. Now, after the garlic is nice and fragrant, we're going to add tomato paste. This is 2 tablespoons of tomato paste. And we're going to cook it until it's deepened in color. Stovetop, it's a little hot. We're gonna caramelize it, and this is going to add a really nice flavor. Like I said, a lot of people use ketchup. Here we have complete control over our flavor, and we are really deepening the flavor by using tomato paste instead and briefly cooking it on the stovetop. Along with the tomato sauce, we're going to add a tablespoon of firmly packed light brown sugar. Should have added it right with the tomato paste. You guys got me a little distracted, but that's okay. We're going to cook this too. Just keep things moving because you don't want anything to burn. All right, once that tomato paste is like a little deepened in color, usually after like 60 seconds of moving, we're going to add our next ingredient, which is, okay, let's see how many comments I get about the pronunciation. 2 tablespoons of worcestershire sauce. Worcestershire sauce. That W sauce. That Lee and Perrin's bottle. 2 tablespoons. We're also going to add 2 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar. Just stir this in. Oh, and the vinegar is gonna smell really potent, so do not take a whiff of that steam or you'll regret it. And I just stir this briefly, get all the browning off the bottom of the pan, and then we'll remove it from the heat. You don't need to, that vinegar smell. You don't need to worry about evaporating it or anything like that. You just want everything nicely coated, and you want the bottom of the pan no longer having any of that brown stuff on the bottom. All right, back to our countertop. All right, let's check on our panade. All of the breadcrumbs should be moistened. They'll look nice and fluffy, they'll have expanded. All the milk should be absorbed. We're looking good. So long as you're at that point, which it usually times out well because it usually takes about 10 minutes total to do all of this. You want this to sit for 10 minutes. So we're good. We're going to add our onion mixture right in here. Meatloaf isn't really pretty. It's not pretty to look at. Making it isn't a super pretty process, but you know, it's one of those comfort foods. Even though it's not pretty, it's still delicious. All right, we're not leaving anything behind because we want all of that flavor. You know, good food just takes a little bit of patience. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and stir this in right away. And I stir this in now just to help cool it down because the next thing I'm going to be adding is 2 large eggs. And these should be ideally at room temperature, but if it's not at room temperature, it's not that big of a deal. Just helps things combine a little better. So I'll crack these separately and we're just going to lightly beat these up. I usually say lightly scramble, but then sometimes people think they have to scramble them on the stovetop like they're making scrambled eggs. So we're just going to lightly beat them. And we do this before adding it to the meat just because it's going to make, or to the breadcrumbs, because it'll help everything combine a little bit better. The egg is a really important binder for helping hold the meatloaf together. We'll also add our spices. I'm using mostly dried spices today, starting with a teaspoon of dried parsley, a teaspoon of salt, just regular old table salt works fine here, a half teaspoon of onion powder, just for a little extra oomph, a half teaspoon of ground black pepper, 1/4 teaspoon of oregano, and for a little kick, we're going to add an 1/8 teaspoon of crushed red pepper. You could leave this out. It doesn't really make things like super spicy, but it does add a nice little kick. We're also going to add a little bit of our meat, but not all. So let's talk about the meat real quickly. You're going to need 2 pounds of ground beef for this recipe. For the best meatloaf, you want to use an 80 to 85% meat. That's 80 to 85% lean. This is going to give you a more moist and more tender meatloaf. When it comes out of the oven, you're going to have some fat oozing off of the sides of it. That's normal, but it's really going to give you the best texture. If you go with a more lean beef, like a 90% or even higher, your meatloaf is just going to be more dry and a little bit more crumbly. So you can obviously choose whatever you want, but you should know what you're getting yourself into. I'm using an 85% lean beef today, and that is my preference. Okay, so you know, or you probably know that anytime you are handling ground beef, you want to be really careful that you don't overwork it, because if you do, again, it can make things really dry. It can mess with the crumb or the texture. So I use this process that I call it tempering, but I really got this process from Serious Eats. They used it in their meatballs, and I've used it in my meatballs, and it really makes a huge difference. So what we do, you know, think about tempering eggs. You add a little bit of egg at a time to the heat to keep it from getting too hot and cooking. So we take a little bit of the meat, like 2 tablespoons. Looks like a nice sized piece. Well, it's a little more than 2 tablespoons. I'm gonna claw back a little bit of that. And we are going to mix this really, really well. We're going to mix a little bit of the meat really well, which is going to help us incorporate it into the larger amount of meat without overworking it. I feel like I'm just repeating myself here, but you get the idea. A little bit here worked in really well, makes it so we don't have to overdo it here. And that is going to give you a great texture. All right, so I'm going to start with my spatula, just gently mixing everything together and kind of smashing the meat. You don't have to be careful yet. And then I get a little bit more aggressive. I actually switch to a whisk because I really want everything well combined. And I especially like to use a whisk if I've used slices of sandwich bread instead of panko, because it really helps break up, you know, any of that bread that might not have totally broken up on its own. Look, I told you this isn't a pretty process, but the end result is worth it. And I really think this is going to be the best meatloaf you've ever had. And if you try it, I want to know what you think. If you really love it, go over to my blog and leave a comment there, because those are very, very helpful to me. I appreciate all of you on YouTube. The website comments really do help me a lot. Get that meat out of the whisk. Take a quick look. Everything's nicely incorporated. So now we add the rest of our meat. Oftentimes meatloaf is cooked in a loaf pan. You know, it's a loaf after all. I actually don't recommend that. I don't like it because then all of the fats kind of like pool around it. And instead of making it like more flavorful, it can make the sides more congealed. It can make things gray. You don't get a nice browning overall, which gives you a lot of flavor. You just get it right on top. So I am going to be using a baking sheet, and I highly recommend you do the same. So for the baking sheet, the beef is going to leak a lot of grease out of it, normal, but also a pain to clean up. So I just line my baking sheet with foil, and then because I don't like baking my food directly on foil, I put a piece of parchment paper on top. That's what I'll be using. Now back to our beef. Go ahead and add all this in here. And now we're going to combine everything And this is where we want to be really careful that we do not overwork the meat, because if you do, things are going to be too tough. We want the meatloaf to hold together, so it needs to be well incorporated so it doesn't just like fall apart, but you don't want it to be overhandled. So this is the messy part. You can wear gloves if you want, if you have like those disposable kitchen gloves. Sometimes I do, but we're just gonna do it. Make sure your hands are clean. Nothing about this feels great. Nothing about this looks great. But if you like meatloaf and you want a really good meatloaf, you gotta do it. You've got the warm from the onions and the cold from the meat. The things we do for good food, just kind of gently squishing it together and turning it. Okay, that hot and cold difference is good for letting you know or feel that you've gotten everything well incorporated. It's not hot, it's just warm. You don't want to see any large pieces of meat. It's not pretty when it goes in the oven. It's not that pretty when it comes out of the oven, but it's good. Go ahead and put this on our baking sheet, and we're going to shape it into a loaf. Think like an 8x5 or 8x4, so a little bit smaller than your average loaf pan, because it's going to spread some in the oven. That's normal. You can smooth the surface a little bit, which will help with any cracks that might happen. Again, cracks aren't really a big deal, but usually they just mean that either things weren't combined well enough, or when you were forming it, you had cracks there that already existed. I've got to wash my hands for the picture for the blog. Nobody's gonna look at that picture in my messy hands and say, oh yeah, I want to make that. Again, she's gonna spread some in the oven. That's fine. And you're going to see some grease. That's also totally normal, especially when you are working with 85% meat, or even especially 80% meat. Okay, but wait, there's more. Let me clean off my hands, and we're going to make our glaze. So every meatloaf gets a glaze on top. A lot of times people will just use ketchup, or ketchup and chili sauce, or barbecue sauce. We're just going to make something from scratch, kind of like a homemade ketchup barbecue sauce hybrid. It's really good. Comes together really quickly. I just mix everything in a measuring cup, because we're going to use half now and half later, and it's just really easy to tell if I've used half. So first up is 1/4 cup of tomato paste, 2 tablespoons of firmly packed brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of honey. I suspect you could probably use maple syrup if you didn't have honey. It's going to just give you a nice sheen, and of course add some flavor and some sweetness, like a good touch of sweetness. We'll also add 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar for a nice little bite to it, and 2 teaspoons of Worcestershire sauce. Some people can't do this sauce. You can substitute coconut aminos. That would be fine. I feel like coconut aminos have like a slighter, sweeter flavor profile, but I use that as a substitute in many of my recipes when I'm cooking at home, like just not cooking, not testing recipes or cooking for the website, and they work well. And that applies for making the actual meatloaf too. We're also going to add a 1/2 teaspoon of table salt and a 1/4 teaspoon of ground black pepper, and we'll just whisk everything together. Get my little baby whisk. That honey in there. We'll resist it first. I love this glaze. Sometimes I'll make extra just to have a little bit on the side. But of course, its flavor deepens in the oven, so it's not quite as flavorful, served like this. We're going to add half of this to the meatloaf now. So about a 1/4 cup is going on top now. It's not an exact science. Save this, you'll need it in a bit. And we're just going to spoon the sauce over the meatloaf. Looks like I didn't do quite enough. There we go. Go around the sides a little bit too. All right, your oven should be 350 degrees Fahrenheit by this time. We are going to take this to the center rack of our preheated oven, and we're going to bake it for 45 minutes. Then after 45 minutes, we'll take it out. We'll add the rest of our glaze on top, spoon that over top, then it goes back in the oven for usually I'd say 20 to 25 minutes. Now I like to temp the meatloaf to tell that it's finished baking. You need to reach an internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit. I just use my instant read thermometer for this. All right, once it comes out of the oven, it's not super beautiful. You've got a little bit of grease. That's normal. It's not the prettiest thing, I know, but if you don't love the presentation here, just move it to a serving platter, like put some parsley around it, makes it look pretty. That's what I did to take these pictures, let me tell you. Trying to make meatloaf look pretty for pictures, not easy. So before you dig in, you do want to wait like 10 to 15 minutes. Otherwise, when it's hot, it can sort of like fall apart on you. So this has been sitting for about a little closer to 15 minutes. Like I can touch the pan now. So let's go ahead and dig into it. Let's cut in. I'm so excited to eat this. If you like this recipe, you would probably also like my Salisbury steaks or my homemade sloppy joes. We've got some of the same flavor themes going on there. Okay, evidently I didn't actually use the camera I wanted to show you guys cutting into it, so I'm just gonna kind of pop it back up there so you can see. Ugh, this is so good. So tender and juicy and moist. And I'm going to slide mine over to my plate. That sauce, it's amazing. Look at that. Oh, it's so good. Meatloaf is amazing served with mashed potatoes. These are my classic mashed potatoes. I don't think I've done a video, but I have classic mashed potatoes and garlic mashed potatoes over on the website. Both are amazing. And I'm doing some roasted broccoli, which I'll probably do. Let me know if you want a video for that. It's very easy. That is how you make my personal favorite meatloaf. I hope it will be your favorite soon too. If you try it, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. I really do always love hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. My favorite part of every video. It has a good meatloaf. Fun run. And today, I forgot to say today. My hands. I talk with my hands. It's the Italian in me. Oops. Oh, I got some sauce on my hand. Look how tender and, I was gonna say moosey and joist.